All right, today we're diving into a fascinating and frankly pretty intense idea, the concept that our integrity has consequences that are literally written into the fabric of the cosmos. We're pulling all of this from a text called Beware of Leaving Scars on the Structure of Life. So let's just jump right in with a huge question that the source tackles head on. What is a perfectly beautiful life? And hey, we're not talking about being rich or famous here. According to this text, the real answer is something way deeper, something you can't even see. So, here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start by uncovering the secret to a beautiful life. Then, we'll get into what the author thinks is the single most damaging thing you can do, leaving a scar of broken trust. After that, we'll tackle a pretty hardcore view on promises, look at the consequences for everybody, and finally, we'll talk about how to clean up what the text calls the soul's garden. Okay, first up, let's get right to the heart of it. What is this big secret to a perfect life? Well, let's just say the answer is not what you'd expect. Here it is, the core concept. The source argues that every single one of us has a corresponding antimatter structure. You can kind of think of it as your spiritual blueprint. So, a perfectly beautiful life, that's a life where your blueprint is totally clean, No marks, no blemishes, absolutely no scars. And believe me, the stakes here are incredibly high. The source talks about this place called the blissful realm, basically a perfect paradise. But here's the catch. It's exclusive. Only those with a perfect, scar-free life structure get in. If you've got scars, you're just not on the list. You're locked out. Simple as that. Right, so that immediately makes you wonder, okay, how do you get these scars in the first place? And what's the one thing that causes the worst kind of damage? Well, that's what we're getting into next. Think about it. Out of all the things you could possibly do wrong in life, what's the number one most destructive act? What's the thing that leaves the deepest, ugliest, most permanent scar on that spiritual blueprint of yours? The answer comes down to this one concept: she-seen. It basically means to lose trust or to break your word. And according to the author, this is not just some minor social slip-up. Oh no. It's treated like a cosmic crime that you commit against your own being. Every single broken promise, every single breached contract carves a permanent scar onto your life's structure. And to show you just how big a deal this is, the source uses a massive example from the Old Testament. It argues that when the Israelites broke their sacred promise, their covenant, it directly led to thousands of years of suffering. So you see, we're not just talking about one person having a bad day. We're talking about historical generation-spanning consequences from one huge act of shishin. Okay, now this is where things get really, really challenging. Because this philosophy, it takes the idea of keeping your word to a whole other level, an absolute extreme. And I bet I know what you're thinking right now. Okay, but wait a minute. What if I made a promise to a total liar, someone who tricked me? Or, to use the source's own words, what if I made a deal with a demon? Surely there's an escape clause for that, right? You don't have to keep that promise. The author's answer? It's a resounding, dramatic, three-part no, no, no. It's an absolute no excuses allowed, uncompromising position. It doesn't matter who you made the promise to. It is completely irrelevant. To explain the logic here, the source uses this really visceral analogy. Think about vomiting. It doesn't matter if you threw up because you ate bad food or because you have the flu. The reason is beside the point. The fact is, you vomited. The same exact logic applies to a broken promise. Your justifications, oh, but they lied to me, or it was a bad deal, they don't matter. The act happened. The scar is formed, regardless. So, what does all this abstract stuff mean for us, here in the real world? Well, the author claims this principle doesn't just shape our spiritual destiny, it shapes our actual physical reality, for individuals and for entire nations. The source basically lays out two roads you can go down. On one side, you have the trustworthy. Individuals who keep their word, they become fortunate, successful, things just work out. Nations built on trust, they become developed and civilized. But then there's the other path. Untrustworthy people are headed for loneliness, poverty, and misery. And nations that lose trust, they just fall into chaos and poverty. So the big takeaway here is that integrity isn't just some nice moral high ground, it's the actual foundation for prosperity. And let's circle back to the biggest consequence of all, because you can't forget this part. The source is brutally clear on this point. This damage is permanent. The The second that scar of a broken promise gets etched onto your life structure, that's it. The gates to that blissful realm are closed to you. Forever. No do-overs, no second chances. So, with stakes that high, it's pretty clear why the final part of the text is all about prevention. How on earth do you maintain a pristine, scar-free life structure? Well, the author gives us this really powerful metaphor, the garden of the soul. The idea is, it's not just about our big actions, like keeping promises. It's about our inner world too. Our thoughts, our hidden desires, all the little weeds and poisonous grasses in there. Yep, those can cause scars too. So the path forward really means getting your head around two key things. First, you have to accept that cleaning up your own mind is just as critical as your external actions. And second, you have to grasp just how unbalanced this whole spiritual process is. And here's what that imbalance looks like. Polluting the garden of your soul. Having a negative thought, breaking a tiny promise, that happens in an instant. It's a flash. But cleansing that pollution, pulling out the weeds, oh, that is a long, slow, difficult process. The damage is so easy, but the repair is incredibly hard. So we end here with a question that this text pretty much forces us to ask ourselves. If causing spiritual damage is so easy, and fixing it is so hard, what weeds might be growing in our own gardens? It's a pretty provocative thought to end on, turning this huge cosmic philosophy into something deeply personal.